Hello and welcome back. In this lecture we will discuss what a sensor is and where and how it can be placed in the environment to collect data. You have heard already the terms sensing and sensor being used, so let's define what a sensor actually is. Well, its definition is pretty wide, as it just tells us a sensor is a device which detects or measures a physical property and records, indicates, or otherwise responds to it. So what does that mean? The most important feature of a sensor is that it measures something. However, this alone is not enough to call such a tool a sensor. We also need to make sure that the measurements are somehow recorded. Let's illustrate this with a very simple example where we ask ourselves whether a thermometer is a sensor. Well, it measures a physical property, temperature, but it doesn't record these measurements by itself. If we would look at the thermometer from time to time and either remember the temperature readings or note them down, we could say that the combination of a thermometer and us together make a sensor. A thermometer alone is strictly speaking not a sensor. Why is this important? Assume you put a thermometer outside, but never look at it for a certain period of time. When you look at it again, you see the current temperature, but you will not find out the temperature in the past. In the old days, logging or recording was done on paper, either manually or by quite complex mechanical solutions. Nowadays, most modern sensors are measurement devices paired with electronics or small computers which take care of recording data at regular intervals. Another thing to consider is whether a sensor is placed in the actual environment to directly measure a certain physical property, or whether it's measuring a property without being placed inside the environment, so to speak. The first type, placed inside the environment, is called in situ sensor. But in many cases, it's not possible to place the sensor in the environment of interest, as it's either too complicated or too dangerous there. So one might take measurements by collecting and analyzing information that comes from or propagates through the area of interest. In such cases, we say that the sensor is placed ex situ. Good examples for in situ sensors would be a buoy in the ocean collecting data as it floats on the surface, or an atmospheric balloon. A good example for a sensor operating ex situ would be a weather satellite measuring the clouds from high above. Already from this, we see that in situ sensors are in principle only capable to gain information in the proximity of the sensor, whereas sensors outside the region of interest get a wider coverage, which in many cases comes with a decrease of precision and resolution in space. And by the way, don't forget your own sensors. Your eyes, ears and your nose are all kinds of ex situ sensors. We can also distinguish between passive and active sensors. Passive sensors make use of natural signals or signals coming from other sources, but not the sensor itself. For example, some satellites are measuring how much sunlight is reflected from the Earth's surface and then determine certain parameters about that surface or the region the sunlight travels through. That would be a classical passive sensor. On the other hand, a satellite transmitting a signal which is then reflected at the surface and received at the same satellite is a perfect example for an active sensor. Both sensor types have advantages and disadvantages. Passive sensors don't need to create the special signals or transmit a large amount of power, which makes it easier to build more compact and smaller size satellites. On the other side, satellites operating as active sensors can generate powerful signals that travel over longer distances and use signals that are optimized for a certain sensing operation. In summary, sensors can be very simple instruments that contain just a few components, or they can be complex systems. This means also that they can be very small, even tiny, or as big as school buses when it comes to satellites or other spacecrafts. I hope you enjoyed this short lesson about what we mean by sensors. Thanks for watching, see you next time.